The wind that night cut right through Ethan Cole's jacket. Snow fell hard and heavy, covering the streets of Chicago in a white silence that only winter could bring. It was New Year's Eve, but for Ethan, it felt like any other night. Quiet, lonely, and too full of memories. He had worked the late shift at the ambulance station, the same one he'd worked since the accident 3 years ago. The accident that had taken his wife, Emily, and their little girl, Grace. He'd built a life around keeping busy, helping strangers, and never looking too closely at his own pain. He was locking up for the night when he noticed movement near the dumpsters behind the building. At first, he thought it was a stray cat, but then he saw a small figure, a child, digging through recycling bins with shaky hands. Ethan's chest tightened. "Hey, buddy," he called softly, stepping closer. The boy froze, clutching a crumpled paper bag to his chest. His cheeks were red from the cold, and his coat looked 2 sizes too small. "It's okay," Ethan said, raising his hands a little. "I'm not gonna hurt you." The boy's voice was small and hoarse. "I'm just looking for bottles. I can trade them for money." Ethan walked a little closer, his boots crunching in the snow. "What's your name?" he asked. The boy hesitated, eyes darting toward the street like he might run. "Lucas," he whispered. "Okay, Lucas, I'm Ethan," he said. "You look freezing. How long have you been out here?" The boy shrugged, shivering. "A while, since my mom got sick. She went to the hospital, but she didn't come back." Ethan felt that sentence land in his chest like a weight. "Where have you been staying?" he asked gently. "Sometimes in the laundromat when it's open, or behind the bakery when they throw stuff out." He said it like it was normal, like he'd learned to make do. Ethan crouched down, lowering his voice. "Listen, Lucas, I've got some food inside and a warm place for you to sit. You don't have to stay long, just until you warm up." For a moment the boy didn't move. Then, maybe because of the wind, or maybe because something in Ethan's voice sounded safe, he nodded. Inside, Ethan poured him hot chocolate and reheated some leftover pasta from his lunch. Lucas ate slowly at first, then faster, like he wasn't sure when his next meal would come. Ethan watched, trying not to show how much it broke his heart. When Lucas finished, he leaned back in the chair, eyes heavy. "You can sleep here tonight," Ethan said. "I've got a couch that's way more comfortable than the floor." Lucas nodded again, too tired to argue. After the boy fell asleep, Ethan sat nearby staring at the kid's small frame under the blanket. Something about him, the quiet way he ate, the way he kept glancing around the room like he was afraid it would disappear, felt too familiar. Ethan thought about Grace, his daughter who would have been about Lucas's age now. He thought about how helpless he'd felt that night in the hospital, the sirens, the blood, the silence after. He'd spent years trying to save other people so he didn't have to think about the ones he couldn't save. But looking at Lucas, he felt that old ache stir again. The next morning, Ethan made pancakes and scrambled eggs. Lucas sat at the table eating carefully, like he was afraid to spill something. "Do you have any family around here?" Ethan asked. The boy shook his head. "My mom said my dad left before I was born. We lived just the 2 of us. When she got sick, she told me to stay strong." Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat. "Do you remember which hospital she went to?" he asked. Lucas thought for a second. "The one on Lincoln Avenue, I think." That was the same hospital where Ethan used to work full-time before the accident. Later that day, after making sure Lucas was safe with a neighbor for an hour, Ethan called the hospital. When they pulled up the name Lucas gave him, Anna Miller, Ethan's stomach dropped. She had died 3 weeks earlier from pneumonia and complications. No one had claimed her body. He hung up, staring at the phone in disbelief. When he got home, Lucas was sitting on the couch watching the snow fall outside the window. Ethan sat down beside him. "Lucas," he said quietly, "I called the hospital. I'm so sorry, buddy. Your mom, she passed away." The boy didn't cry right away. He just nodded, eyes blank, staring through the window like he couldn't take it in. Then he whispered, "She told me she'd come back." Ethan's chest tightened as he pulled the boy close. "I know," he said softly. "I know, kid." That night, after Lucas fell asleep again, Ethan made another call, this time to social services. He explained what had happened and said he'd like to apply for temporary guardianship. The woman on the other end sounded surprised. "Are you sure, Mr. Cole? It's a big responsibility." Ethan looked at the boy sleeping on his couch, one small hand clutching the blanket like it was the only thing keeping him safe. "Yeah," he said, "I'm sure." The next few weeks were a blur of forms, interviews, and visits from caseworkers. Through it all, Lucas stayed with him. They built small routines, Saturday pancakes, evening walks, bedtime stories that always ended with Lucas asking, "Can I stay one more night?" Ethan always smiled and said, "As many as you need." But healing wasn't easy. Some nights Lucas would wake up crying, calling for his mom. Other nights he'd hide food under his pillow, afraid it would be gone in the morning. Ethan learned to take things slow, to reassure him, to listen, to stay. One afternoon, Lucas came home from school with a drawing. It was two stick figures holding hands in front of a small house. "That's us," he said shyly. Ethan looked at the picture and smiled, though his eyes stung. "Yeah," he said, "that's us." As time passed, something changed in Ethan too. For years he had moved through life like a ghost, saving lives during the day, but never really living his own. Lucas brought noise back into his house, laughter, questions, messes, and the kind of chaos that reminded him what it meant to be alive. But one afternoon when Ethan was looking through old hospital records for paperwork, he noticed something that stopped him cold. The date on Anna Miller's chart, the night she was admitted, was the same night his wife and daughter had been brought into the ER after the crash. Ethan scrolled further, heart pounding. Anna Miller had been his patient that night. She'd been in another ambulance that arrived just minutes before his family's. He had stabilized her and handed her off to another doctor before the chaos of his own tragedy began. His mind raced. He had saved her that night, but years later her son had somehow found his way back to him. He sat for a long time staring at the screen. It felt like all the years of pain had folded into this single moment. He could have seen it as guilt, as one more reminder of who he couldn't save, but instead he felt something else. Maybe this was life's quiet way of giving him another chance to protect someone, to be the man he couldn't be that night. When the social worker called a few months later to tell him the adoption hearing was scheduled, Ethan could hardly speak. On the morning of the hearing, he dressed Lucas in his favorite sweater and tie. "You nervous?" Ethan asked. Lucas grinned. "A little, are you?" Ethan smiled. "More than a little." In court, the judge looked over the papers, then at them. "Mr. Cole, you've gone above and beyond for this child," she said. "Are you ready to take on the responsibility of being his father?" Ethan's voice shook as he answered, "I already am." Lucas squeezed his hand and whispered, "Does this mean I can call you Dad now?" Ethan's eyes filled with tears. "Yeah, buddy," he said softly. "It means that." That night, they celebrated with pizza and a movie. Lucas fell asleep halfway through, curled up against him on the couch. Ethan looked down at him and felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. The kind that doesn't erase the past but makes it bearable. On the anniversary of the crash, Ethan drove with Lucas to the small lake, where his wife and daughter used to feed the ducks. They stood by the frozen water, the wind sharp but clean. This is where I used to come with them, Ethan said quietly. I lost them here, but I think they'd be happy to know I found you. Lucas looked up at him, eyes wide. I didn't think anybody would ever find me, he said. Ethan rested a hand on his shoulder. Sometimes we don't find people, he said. Sometimes they find us. As they drove home, the city lights glowed against the snow. It was New Year's Eve again, 1 year since they met behind that station. For Ethan, it no longer felt like just another night. It felt like the start of something steady and real. He glanced at the boy sleeping beside him and smiled. Sometimes redemption doesn't come as a miracle. It comes as a small hand reaching for yours, trusting you to never let go. That night, Ethan Cole wasn't a lonely man trying to outrun his past anymore. He was a father again. And in the quiet warmth of his home, with the sound of Lucas breathing softly in the next room, he finally understood. Love doesn't always return in the way you expect. Sometimes it shows up when you least deserve it, asking only that you open the door and let it in.